Hello, everybody, and welcome to another weekly video with myself, Sam Volkering, editor and investment director at Southbank Investment Research, and my esteemed colleague, Nick Hubble, with a rap sheet of successes and accolades. Nick, just far too long for me to go through in one hit, so I'll just say welcome.
Yeah, well, you could mention the recent stock market action in the SpaceX shares as one of my successes.
Okay, we should probably touch on that because last week we did say you said it would go up, I said it would go down. You were right, I was wrong. Should we draw a line through
It's,
it there,
it's
or should
since
we just
gone,
quickly cover a bit of that?
it's since gone down though, right? It's
Well, yeah. I mean, look, come on. It was up for like 2 or 3 consecutive days. At one point, it was worth more than Microsoft and Amazon. Yet, I think what was it? So, what Amazon's annual revenue is something like $120 billion, and SpaceX's is -4. So, take that as you will. But I think reality will come back to the market pretty quick. But at least on the first day of trading, I concede defeat, Nick.
yeah, well, it's a bit of a small share of the total float as well, right? So the value of the whole company is being determined by a very small share of the actual ownership
Yes.
structure.
Yes, it's funny. I saw a lot of crypto investors online saying this is a classic crypto rug pull where the lion's share of the token holding is held by one person. There's a tiny little float that actually is tradable. There's a huge pump, and then the founders holding all the tokens just dump into the market. So it will be interesting when the lockups expire, what kind of selling pressure that puts onto SpaceX. But look, I mean, as we've said before, it's an exciting thing. I think people should almost treat it more like an AI play and an AI data center play at the moment, and a telecommunications play than a rockets to the moon and Mars play. Um, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. Isn't that how it goes?
Yeah, the question is whether, well, I guess what this business model is going to be, because we're sort of all punting on Elon Musk finding one somehow for all these rockets and this money. It's done pretty well in the past, right? But it's not a clear plan for how the space economy is going to work. There's not a clear plan for how it's going to be regulated, licensed, what's going to be up there, what's not, what the business models of those industries are going to be. There's just the presumption that there will be something up there, and therefore the obvious way to play this is through rockets.
Yeah, look, I mean, it seems like there's actually a pretty good long-term play in there, but I just think that short-term, there's going to be some good buying opportunities into that. But I would be taking, at least, if anyone's thinking about SpaceX specifically, I mean, my view would be to take like a 10, 20-year kind of window time frame on this thing. But as I said, it's going to be volatile in the short term. Now, speaking of volatility, I want to get your thoughts because just before we jumped on camera, you called it the Treaty of Versailles. Why don't you just step our readers through what you meant by the Treaty of Versailles, Nick?
Yes, so Trump has signed a memorandum of understanding, I believe it's called, with Iran
But
on the deal.
before you continue, it was an MOU, and we all know when a company signs an MOU and they make a real big song and dance about it, and they're like, "Oh, look, we signed a new deal," and it's like, "Hang on, you signed an intent to do a deal. That's not actually a deal."
Yeah, so that's the first point to make. There's all these issues about what's actually in the deal and whether the two sides have the same understanding of what's in the deal. So exactly like you say, investors have a long history of understanding these situations because how often they go wrong. Because we've seen all this before and end in disaster. So there's that side to it. And of course, this is disproportionately important to investors because of the energy situation. So far, the energy markets have plunged, as you might expect. The question is how quickly we can get back to normality and whether the oil spike and the gas spike and so on and so forth may yet be to come, because the disruption in the oil markets takes inherently weeks and months to play out because you have all these existing inventories moving through the system, through the supply chain. So the question is whether the supply systems can not just meet existing demand, but also the catch-up, the air bubble, the air pocket that's now stuck inside the oil and gas supply chain of not having had oil and gas out of Hormuz for a while. And also, we've got an odd situation where a lot of the oil market has readjusted itself to a lack of oil out of Hormuz. So you could make the case that now there's going to be some sort of a bizarre glut because we were dealing fairly well with lack of oil and gas coming out of that part of the world. So you could also argue that now that there's this additional flow that's been opened up, maybe there's going to be too much oil and gas in the market. So it's all to play for yet when it comes to the thesis of what happens as a result of the Hormuz and Iran war situation. Oil prices could yet move up much higher. They could yet fall much lower.
While we're speaking of oil, it would be remiss of us not to touch on one of the probably biggest stories in the UK at the moment. Although, if you jump on the Telegraph, the biggest story was a kid got thrown into a cage of crocodiles at the zoo. But anyway, I hope that kid's okay. By the way, that's horrendous. Nonetheless, the Makerfield by-election is politically, at least, the biggest story happening right now as we speak. I've got it. I've got the live updates and key moments feeding on my screen here. Turnout. Now, this is something. The turnout for the vote was 58.75%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but in terms of traditional numbers around voting turnout, that's huge. That's big. That's a bunch of people in a region saying, actually, you know what? We're going to have our say this time.
What's odd about this one is that nobody can agree on the basics. Nobody can agree on whether high turnout favors Labour and Burnham, or whether it favors reform, or maybe restore, because there's a bunch of people who are disenfranchised that have come back into the voting. So even if we can agree on what the vote share, the turnout was, we can't agree on what impact that might have on the vote share. I love these situations where the different sides in politics or in business or in investing can't even agree on the basics, because it really opens up opportunities for investors who can think straight and who aren't influenced by their ideology or by what they want to see happen. And you can think clearly about what might be going on in the political system and therefore in the financial system, because, of course, we live in an era now where politics is heavily influencing financial markets. And so you can't ignore it anymore.
I want to get your view on something here, because when it comes to this stuff, you are one of the most in tune people with how geopolitics impacts things like the energy markets and the commodities markets. I want to put two scenarios to you. Let's say Burnham wins this thing, and only by a slender margin. I think it's quite clear he's not going to win in a landslide if he wins this. It's going to be pretty slender. If he gets that and becomes an MP, Starmer said he'll, put him on the cabinet, blah, 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 blah. I think it's pretty clear he's going to make a leadership run and probably be successful in that. How do you think that impacts UK energy policy? I saw recently that the EV charging industry, so all the companies that develop EV charging infrastructure and networks, have started more or less complaining to the current government that their move away from net zeros to back towards a fossil fuels, oil and gas policy is undermining everything that they've done. So they're clearly worried. The net zero industries are clearly worried that even Labor is going to shift back towards an oil and gas policy. How aggressive do you think Burnham in government makes that? And does that push, even with a Labor government, back towards a more pro oil and gas Britain?
Yeah, I think what's happened over the last few years is a reckoning of policy generally, but especially energy policy for the UK government. The whole net zero thing was never going to work. A lot of the green energy technology was never going to work. And people realize that. But when you get new leadership in, of course, the same delusions can pop up again for a while, because it takes politicians a while to realize that what they're doing and want to do does. And so we're going to get another boost for these delusions that the Labour government had when it first was elected. Another round of the promises that the current Labour government has realized it can't meet, but a new Labour government would be able to make those delusional promises all over again. So, another tailwind for all of that. But in the end, the same reckoning will apply and the same realization will apply. And the government will again realize that it's not viable. The real problem I have with all of this is that if Burnham gets in, it's a leftward shift, right? So it's going to be Miliband and Burnham, and the more softer still than the hard left, but more left than the current government is going to get in, while the country is very obviously shifted to the right. So you've got a split in direction of the vote and the preferences of the people and the way the government's going to move. And you've had that twice now in the sense that Labour got the disproportionate share of the seats in Parliament relative to the vote. And now you're going to have at the top of Labour a shift towards the left again. So twice the shift in the country to the right has been ignored, and you've got the opposite happening instead. And my worry is that if you combine that with things like two-tier policing and some of the controversies about immigration now playing out on our streets rather than just warnings about that, this is sort of a toxic combination because people start to lose faith in the legal system, the police system, and the political system at the same time. So what do you think they're going to do?
Mm. I'm just looking at the live updates now, and just a few minutes ago, some info came through about saying that Reform's expecting to lose this by about 2,500 votes. Now, by the time everybody's actually watching this, there'll be an outcome, but it does look like, on the face of it, that Reform's worried about losing this. Where I think maybe a couple of weeks ago they were probably confident about taking a slender victory, but it seems like they are concerned about Restore UK stealing some votes through a combination of probably harder right policy and also probably through a combination of people not really looking at voting ballots properly and just seeing the two similar names and maybe not even actually knowing what they're voting for, which does happen, people, by the way, just so you know. Very well aware that people will not look at a vote ballot paper properly and vote for the wrong thing. Having said that,
Sam, if you remember, I think it was more than a year ago now. One of the things Nigel Farage says, which was controversial at the time, was that the worse things get, the better they get for reform at the next election, right? So you need to have this experience with Labour for people to never again make the mistake. And so I think he's taking the same attitude towards this by-election, where the best possible thing for reform in Makerfield in the next proper election is a wonderful experience of Andy Burnham as Prime Minister for a few years. Nothing could support the reform vote in Makerfield more than actually living with what you voted for.
That's a valid point, actually. And I think that's probably a good message for our readers. So, again, regardless of which part or side of the political divide that you sit on, it would feel like that if you're fed up, if you're one of the people that's fed up with the government, that you're about to get a new leader of that government to have his crack at it. And then you can decide in the next election whether you're fed up with him as well and the party as general. Now, if you're fed up with Reform and Restore, you're going to get your guy. You're going to get your new guy to have a go at it as well. So, I mean, politics is one of those things where at some point, someone new gets a go and they either stuff it up unbelievably or they do really well. I can't remember in recent history too many that have done really well. But the point is that, you kind of do get what you vote for. And with a big turnout like that, you're going to get what you vote for. And I still think that we're going to see Burnham. I mean, I think it's indications are he's going to get this. Starmer said he's going to come in, as I said earlier, part of the cabinet. He's going to challenge the leadership. If he challenges the leadership, I think we're going to get an early election. I think he's going to want his own mandate to go to the British people. He may actually be, that confident that Labor's still got such a big majority that even if they lose seats, they'll still win an election outright. So I think people are going to get to have their say. And that's actually probably the most important part about what comes out of this is that if we get an early election, which I tend to think that we do, if he challenges and successfully topples Starmer, the British people will get to have their say, and that's exciting. I think that's an exciting moment for the entire country because you've now seen, what the Conservatives did. You're now seeing in real time what Labor has done. Cast your vote. Cast your vote. I mean, that's what a democracy is for. But I do think that when there is an election, be it early or next, I think one of the biggest turning points for it is going to be it's going to be oil. It's going to be oil and gas. It's going to be energy. And I say that because whether you're Labor, Conservatives, Reform, Restore, Greens, or what is it? Bin face guy. whatever politician and political sway you have, I think everyone's sick of the cost of energy going up. With that said, Nick, are you sort of in the same boat? You think that one of the big turning points of the next election is going to be the energy policy and what stance they take?
Yes, but the problem is that if you have an early election with a new Labour Prime Minister, then it's not clear what you're voting for or against, right? Because he's come in to bring change to the party of some sort. But is he going to stick to what his plan is? And what is his plan going to be? If we have an election in 2029 after a few years of Andy Burnham as Prime Minister, then people are going to revolt against whatever he does because politicians are never actually able to deliver. Whereas if he can win an election based on making promises that he knows he can't deliver in the end, that's going to be interesting. Yeah. So we're in trouble either way. And in the end, energy policy has the turning circle of the Titanic, right? So you've got to make a change today, and maybe in 15, 20 years at best, you see a shift.
Yeah.
So I don't think it really matters too much what happens on the ground in reality in terms of energy policy, because the political consequences won't flow back for very many years to come. We're very far down this dead end of net zero and green energy. Turning it around is probably going to cause a lot of problems before it causes solutions. And you've got, in the meantime, the whole AI bubble spiking energy demand. So I think we're going to get a nasty reckoning no matter who people vote for on the energy policy side. And it would be ironic if that shifts politics, because the current crop of politicians won't be able to influence that much.
Very, very, very true. Now, that's pretty much all we've got time for this week. However this plays out, it's going to be an interesting few weeks and an interesting few months in the political sense in the UK, which has a knock-on effect to the geopolitical situation. And of course, the geopolitical situation as it is with the MOU signed in, as Nick said, the Treaty of Versailles, the new Treaty of Versailles itself, whether the what is this, like the 42nd deal that's been struck, whether it becomes the one or falls apart and we get a 43rd at some point, however many. There's a lot of deals, lots of deals. I got lots of deals. My Trump impersonation is shocking. But before we go further, one of the things that we also want to let everyone know about is, and we've said this before in a few videos, we've got a live YouTube event coming up on the 9th of July. So what are we now? 19th of June. So just a couple weeks time, we've got a live event. I think it's at 3 p.m. on our YouTube channel, the Southbank Research YouTube channel, with Nick and me, and one of our other colleagues, Rich. And we're going to be talking about one of the biggest questions that we get from readers at the moment is, where should I invest? Because like we've talked about oil today and a bit of AI and SpaceX and the geopolitical situation unfolding. And people are like, I just confused. I don't know what's going on. What do I do? Where do I invest? And we're going to be answering a simple question. If I had 10,000 quid to invest today, where would I put it? Oil, gas, AI, cash, bin face guys, metal, commodities, whatever. Where would you put £10,000 if you had it to invest today? So we're going to be answering that question, looking at all of these markets, talking about how to go about it, how you would invest if you're starting out, or how you would invest if you're an experienced investor. Very exciting thing. It's live, real time. We're going to be fielding questions from people as we go through. So join us for that. Stack up a load of questions if you want. I believe there is going to be a link in the description of this video below, and or maybe a QR code popping up either somewhere here, there, or below. Click it, register, join us on the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well if you're watching us on YouTube right now, or if you're not, go to YouTube and subscribe there. Lots of exciting stuff coming up. As I said, July 9, 3 p.m. UK time. So thanks, Nick, again for joining me today. A lot of stuff going on. I mean, that's exciting for investors. It is an exciting time for investors. Crisis brings opportunity, and there's just a stock market full of great investments that are volatile, but a lot that are making some serious money. And thanks for joining me. Everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget about our event on the 9th of July. We'll see you next time, next week. Bye for now.